Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May Oldham County Board of Adjustments. My name's Larry Otterback. It's a little bit after 9 o'clock and we are now in session. We have two cases before us today. The procedures will be the same for both cases. Here in a minute I'll swear staff in. Amy's going to read the staff report. There will be a round of questioning by board members to staff. When we're done with that, Amy will take a seat and I'll call you, the applicant, forward. You'll come forward, raise your right hand, state your name and address, and be sworn in. Tell us what it is you'd like to do and justify the project. You'll have 20 minutes to do so. Clock is on the wall. When you're done with that, there'll be a round of questioning by board members to you. When we're done, you may take a seat. I'll call forward anybody that wishes to speak in favor, and then those opposed. Those both in favor and opposed will have 10 minutes each to state why they're in favor or why you're opposed. And when we're done with that, those in favor and those opposed may take a seat. The applicant will have time for a rebuttal, then final statements. I'll open it up to the board for any questions to anybody in the audience, and then I'll close the floor, open it up for general discussion among board members, and then call for an up and down vote. Cell phones, please make sure they're off or on vibrate. If you need to use your phone, please excuse yourself from the courtroom. Just make sure it's off when you come back in. Board members, make sure your mics are on. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and swear staff in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All right, David, you want to read the first case?
Yes, sir. Docket number OC18017, application has been filed requesting a conditional use permit for a detached accessory dwelling unit and variance for maximum square footage on property located at 1406 East Moody Lane, Crestwood.
Good morning, Amy Alley with Oldham County Planning and Development Services. As Mr. Pate just stated, this is an application requesting a conditional use permit to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit in a garage, proposed second floor addition to a current detached garage. The property is zoned CO1 conservation and is approximately 6.487 acres. This is an aerial view of the property. You'll see Moody Lane here to your north. This is the primary structure. This is an accessory structure, and then this is a barn that's located on the applicant's property. This is just an area view that gives an overview of the structures and drives. And then this is a overview from our GIS that shows the area highlighted here. This is all the 100-year floodplain. There have been no prior actions before the Oldham County Board of Adjustments regarding this property. This is a view of the property from East Moody Lane. It's currently being renovated. This is the east view on Moody Lane. This is the north view, which is across the street. This is the west view. These are the north adjoining property owners, so there's a large field here which is actually part of the Osita property, and then this is the next adjoining residential property. This is the west adjoining property. This is the east adjoining property, which is a large field. The applicant again is requesting a conditional use permit for the construction of a detached accessory dwelling unit in a proposed second floor addition of a current detached garage. During the research of the possibility of an addition to the south of the home, the applicant found that the FEMA survey and elevation certificate showed the basement area was 2 feet into the flood zone area and deemed uninhabitable. Currently, the applicant's 6 children share the 2 bedrooms in the basement and now needs more livable area due to the basement area being in the flood zone and being deemed uninhabitable. The current accessory structure, which is a detached garage, is 768 square feet, and the applicant is proposing to add a second floor addition for living space for the children that will include a closet, bathroom, and living space. So this is looking from the driveway. Again, this is the primary structure, and then the driveway drops down. This is the garage located at the rear. This is a picture of the current detached garage. This is the floor plan that just shows stairs entering from the outside. I say outside, but it appears to be from the outside. It has a closet, a bath, and then the sleeping area. Section 250.040, item E states detached accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 25% of the primary structure's square footage. The home is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a total of 2,000 square feet. It is 1,000 square feet per floor. Therefore, 500 square feet of the allowable has an allowable use of ADU space. So again, this is just another picture of the garage, and then also shows the elevation, how it does drop down. This is just a side view of the yard as well. These are the requirements for accessory dwelling units under general provisions. I won't go through these individually, but the applicant does meet all of these. The main one is that must have minimum of 2 acres when served by septic. This property is served by septic, and the applicant has 6.487 acres under the general provisions there. Specific provisions under detached accessory dwelling units, it says may be allowed only after the approval of a conditional use permit. That's why the applicant is before you today. It is properly zoned. CO1 is one that is allowed to have a detached accessory dwelling unit after an approved CUP. It does meet the density requirements. It does meet item 4, which is the minimum setbacks for the primary structures. The front yard is approximately 145 feet. To the right side yard is 150. The left side yard should be more than 17 feet. I think that's a typo. And then the rear is 140. I have. Yeah, so it's 100 feet from the front, 430 on the left side yard, 95 is the right, and 400 in the rear. Don't look like I updated my little chart. The other item, item 6, detached accessory dwelling units must at least be 5 feet away from the primary structure. There's approximately 35 feet between the house and the garage, so it meets that requirement as well. And then detached accessory dwelling unit shall not be located in front of the primary structure, which it is not. It is located to the rear. These are the approvals that they've received so far. They have been approved a stream construction permit from the Kentucky Division of Water to add a second story to the existing garage. So he has gone through that approval process. If this conditional use permit is approved, he's already received the approval from the state to construct in the floodplain because the living space will be above the base flood elevation. And then he also checked with the Oldham County Health Department regarding the use of the septic and said, you can see where they have signed off that the addition is no increase, because he's repurposing the bedrooms that were being used in the single-family home to the accessory structure. So there won't have to be any improvements done to the existing or additions to the existing septic. According to the applicant's justification statement, an addition cannot be to the north due to the location of the road, to the east because of the driveway, the west due to the location of geothermal unit, and to the south because of the floodplain. The applicant also states in his justification statement that the addition to the garage is the best and only choice because of the floodplain, location of power line easement, and can also utilize the existing septic system. So in summary, the applicant is asking for 2 requests today. The conditional use permit for the accessory dwelling unit, and he's also asking for a variance of maximum square footage The primary house is 2,000 square feet, which included that finished basement. 25% of ADU space is 500 square feet. The proposed ADU space is 768 square feet, so the variance requested is 268 square feet. If you approve the conditional use permit, you'll also need to approve that variance as well. That is all that I have.
Amy, could you go back to one of the aerial shots? Yeah, that's fine right there. The primary structure,
It's here,
the barn that's the ADU, proposed ADU,
right here.
and is that not, where is the floodplain?
Area highlighted in blue. This is not survey quality. This is just an overlay from the FEMA maps. So you can, just for clarification, you can construct in a floodplain with an approved permit from the Division of Water, and you also have to get a local floodplain permit through our office, which Jim is our local floodplain administrator. You just have to build 2 feet out of the base flood elevation. So an example would be is if the base flood elevation is 455 feet, the lowest floor must be 457 feet, which is 2 feet above base flood elevation.
All right, any other questions for Amy? Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, if we could have the applicant come forward. Morning. Raise your right hand, state your name and address.
I'm James Stewart Bowe II, 1406 East Moody Lane, Crestwood, Kentucky.
Jim?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Jim, can you justify the project?
For me, sir, it's really just about quality of life and the fact that when we initially bought the property, we didn't know that the basement was uninhabitable. That was the process of going through the addition and finding what our options were. I mean, in hindsight, if I would have known that, I probably wouldn't have bought the property. But I'm just coming up with financially responsible ways to deal with the situation I'm in. I have a 16-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl, 13-year-old girl, and privacy and quality of life is important for them. And I mean, it would be great if I could ignore the fact that that's the worst case scenario for a 100-year flood. But the reality is, I've lost 2 bedrooms, and I've lost 1,000 square feet, and now I'm living in 1,000 square feet technically, and I need to make some sort of adjustment in regards to living space. And that was the alternative. I mean, I tried to go east, like I said. There's easements and other factors which didn't make it those valid options. And so I've exhausted those options. And we are fond of the property. I mean, apart from losing the footage, but when we initially bought it, if you look at it, we thought that we were going to be able to extend in the present signature that it was, and that we wouldn't be, losing space, as it were. And that space, that truth came after the survey, because obviously when we bought the house, we asked, hey, is there flood insurance involved in here? Because we knew there was a creek there, and of course the representation you saw up there, that was what the insurance companies go off of. So we don't pay flood insurance. But when we did the survey, the reality was that our basement was in the floodplain. So I'm just dealing with truth, and that's kind of where we're at.
All right, questions for Jim?
How long have you owned the property?
About a year and a half.
And this is more of just an open question to you, is that have you considered a more traditional addition to your existing home?
My problem, I did look to go up, and then I had contractors come over, and the concerns were, hey, this is an older house. If we put more weight on the top, we don't know if the footings are going to be able to support that, but we do know that the footings on the garage will, because they're by code legitimate. We went around and we poked to see, hey, this could support a structure. My concern about going over the geothermal unit would be the same as yours. With my luck, something would go wrong, and then I'd have a structure over the very unit which is providing, climate control in my house. And so, did I answer your question, sir?
I think so. Thank you.
Well, let me tag on to the similar question. So you talked about going up. What about out on sides of the home or behind the home?
I can't go, the easement prohibits me from going south, and I would be actually basically looking at like a 5-foot addition. And that's not even really a bedroom. And so, those are glorified closets. And we just came from Hawaii, and there was 7 of us in a 1,400 square foot place, and that's not living. And that's why we came here, because we had 2,000 square feet, but now I have 1,000 square feet. So I'm actually, I moved from a place where I thought, wow, we can't get much smaller than this, to a place where technically I have less square footage than I did when I was there, which is the irony. I have more acreage, but I have less living space.
How will you be utilizing that lower level area once this is done?
Right now, well, obviously the kids are in it, but we're going to use it for the laundry rooms down there. For spillover storage. There's no shortage of stuff that people want to store, and that's probably what we intend to do with it.
So you will cease any sleeping quarters in the lower level?
Yeah, by the letter of the law, there will be nobody down there.
Question I need you to help verbalize for us is the fact that per the regulations, any addition of an ADU like this would need to be only 500 square feet based on the percentages applied. So I need you to justify why 500 square feet is not going to be enough.
Well, I guess in this context, what I'm saying is I lost 1,000. I understand, because I read that regulation as well, sir. All I was asking was to maximize the amount of space I had possible and not to extend beyond the present signature of the garage. If I were to do 568, I'd have a really nice porch, and then once again, 500 square feet for kids, that's doable, but 700, it's better, and I'm not extending beyond the garage in any capacity. I'm merely matching the structure that's already there. I'm not asking to come out into the floodplain or anything else like that. The floodplain is only going to be disturbed by the stairs, which I have, which are going up into the accessory dwelling.
Amy, can you bring up the drawing that it was submitted for the addition? where you show, yes. So let me help walk you through what I'm trying to get to, okay?
No problem.
Yeah. So when we look at the closet and the bathroom area, about how much square footage are we talking about there that's going to be taken out of 768? Do you know how big that space is?
I think I made it like an 8-foot closet.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily to scale. I did a drawing that was a representation.
I'm just looking for approximations of how much square feet is taken out of the 768 with the bathroom, the hallway, and the closet area on that end. Is that?
Okay, so 10, and that's,
So you're 24 from top to bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how far out is that coming? Like 8 feet? Is that right? Is that what you said?
that right there is the signature of the garage. Like, that is from wall to wall on both sides.
From the far left,
What's he saying? Yeah.
What is that?
what is
I'm
that?
saying that's about 8 feet.
What is that?
So
It was
you're-
whatever the code was for a bathroom, and the closet was just matching the bathroom.
So you're just under 200 square feet that would be taken out of 768. So then you were only left with 560 to put a room for how many people to live in that space?
There's going to be 6 children.
So you're gonna have 6 children in less than 600 square feet of actual living space. So that's why you need that much space instead of 500 would not be enough for everyone to have a bed and
I
areas to
understand
have
what
their
you're-
personal
yes, because
stuff.
I wanted.
I'm trying to help you justify
No,
why we
that's
have
what I
to
was
go more
trying
than
to say,
500.
because if we made it 500 and we did the same thing, then obviously I'm losing now just a 300 square foot of living space. And I was just trying to use like an open bay barracks model where there's no walls, so I can maximize
Right.
the freedom there. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were
Yep,
getting at. I
that's
just
fine.
wanted the space
I'm
for
trying
that.
to help you. That's understand. It's okay.
I didn't think
So-
you were trying to sink my ship. I was just like, okay, I'm trying to use
Right.
as much space as I possibly can.
Right. So, for what we're saying then, based on the remaining area to put beds, personal items, you got less than 600 square feet for 6 people. That's what I was trying to get at. So that's your justification why it needs to be bigger than 500.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, not
That's okay. You don't do this all the time. That's all right.
a lot.
I have a question just for clarification. Based on the proposal and the images that we've seen, I'm going to assume that you're going to take off the existing roof. And
Yes.
you're adding an entire 8-foot wall to the structure, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Not that you care, but I would like to keep the present trusses, which were in there, and see if I could reuse them and bring it up. Exactly.
Take them off and move them up?
Exactly.
Okay. Just curious as to how you're going to try to orchestrate all that under that space.
I don't know how I'm going to move the trusses yet, but that was the ambition, was to preserve them. And
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Okay, Jim, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody here wishing to speak in favor? You may take a seat. Yeah. Is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of the applicant? Opposed? Jim, I thought you were raising your hand when you said opposed. Okay, board members, questions for anybody else in the audience? Okay, I'll close the floor for public hearing, open it up for general discussion.
I think that as we look at variances of these kind of things, there's a couple of issues going on. If we look at the one in terms of he's explored the opportunities of what could he do, what options are out there, and he's very limited in terms of the amount of options that he has to be able to have the number of people he has in his family in the space. So in this case, the ADU is a perfect kind of scenario because expanding the current home is more than difficult. In terms of variance to go above the square footage and the 25%, I think we've seen that it's not like he's trying to build a giant palace or anything. It's taking existing footprint of an existing building and just adding on as is. And even with that, it's actually a small amount of square footage on a per person basis that he's accommodating. So I don't think it's unreasonable to approve both the required variance and the CUP.
Okay, anybody else?
I think with the information provided today, I think this is a good place for, this gentleman's between a rock and a hard place. It's, I think, a necessity to maintain this home with his family. He's going to have to make this kind of a choice. This would not be his first choice, I'm sure, but dealing with what he has and the testimony that's been provided today, I would vote in favor of this.
Would this have to be 2 motions or can it be 1?
It'd be 2 separate motions,
Okay. Thank you.
Discussion? Anything? One alternative, and I didn't ask, is move. The property isn't conducive to, current conditions, or it's an option.
Yeah, and if it was something that would be a problem for causing undue hardship on neighbors or something like that, I could look at it as something that would say we could deny it, but I see nothing in here that says that this would cause any change in the community, any other thing that would cause a problem in the local community.
I think given the circumstances of the testimony, the idea that he's trying to come up with the best possible solution given the circumstances and the hand that he's been dealt. I can't imagine what it'd be like to buy a home and then find out that 50% of what I thought I purchased was not usable. In light of that, the idea of moving could be a tough pill to swallow. And based on the information that he has today, it may also change the value of his property as far as the saleability aspect of it. And I think given the circumstances, going back to what was discussed, I think that it seems to be a very viable solution. And it's unfortunate because he purchased something he thought was fully available to him, and then he later finds out that that's not the case. And I think in light of that, I would be inclined to approve this as it's been presented as well.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'm willing to hear a motion.
Move to approve a variance to allow a maximum square footage of 768 square feet for an ADU for OC-18-017. Based on the testimony of the limitations on the property, additions, testimony of floodplain, testimony of where the house sits and relative to the street, also relative to where the heating and cooling unit is. He's got very limited options. So the request to go above the 25 square foot seems reasonable based on that testimony, and I move to approve because it will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare, alter essential character, or cause a nuisance to the public, and is not an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulation. The variance shall only apply to the application considered at the May 17, 2018 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing.
Rob, I'm sorry, was that a motion for the size or a motion?
Variance for the size, yes.
Not the conditional
Not the-
use permit.
Yeah, I said variance at the very beginning.
You did,
Yes.
so it's, okay, all right, so we're gonna have two motions, this one's for the size. We have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Technically, you need to approve the CUP
Well, it's-
allowing the granting of it first, then the variance. You
Oh.
can't grant a variance on something that's not been approved.
Gotcha. All right.
There you go.
I know it.
Larry, just let it die because of lack of a second, and we'll do it again.
He seconded.
Oh, you did second?
Yeah, he did.
It's second, but can't vote on it right now.
Oh.
You can go to
So
the
we have a
item.
motion, we have a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Just delay the vote.
And then we'll delay the vote, okay. Now, let's get a motion for the CUP.
Okay. Move to approve the conditional use permit for a detached accessory dwelling unit for OC-18-017, based on the testimony of the options available to the property owner at 1406 East Moody Lane. There are limited options as to what can be done. It seems like a reasonable use of a conditional use permit to allow him to enjoy the property and does not impede on any surrounding property owners or change the character, alter public health, safety, or welfare, and is not an unreasonable circumvention of any zoning requirements. The conditional use permit application shall only be considered at the May 17th, 2018 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? Let's do the second motion first. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the CUP has been approved. And then let's do the variance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, variance has been approved. All right, David.
Okay, we have docket number OC-18018. An application has been filed requesting conditional use permit with parking service waiver for a private club on property located at 7101 Shader Lane, LaGrange.
All right, Amy Alvey again with the Oldham County Planning and Development Services. As Mr. Pate just stated, this is a request for a conditional use permit for private event space with a parking surface waiver. The property is located at 7101 Schrader Lane in LaGrange. The property is zoned CO1 Conservation and AG1 Agricultural and is approximately 110 acres. There have been no prior actions before the Oldham County Board of Adjustments regarding this property. This is an aerial view of the property. They are highlighted in red. This is the zoning. So you'll see the green area here is CO1, and then the light green area there is AG1 Agricultural. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to operate a private event space out of an existing single-family home known as Valaterra, located on the 110 acres. This is just a screenshot of their website that explains kind of an overview of what they do regarding workshops and retreats, and then there's also tabs and stuff that show the use of the land. This is the entrance into Valaterra here. It is a gated drive. It is at the terminus of Schrader Lane. So if you go all the way to the end of Schrader Lane, you run into this property. This is exiting from the entrance area of Valaterra out of Schrader Lane. This is the north view. You see it's wooded farmland. The south view, the same. This is an area map that just shows, gives you approximate, this is 393 Cedar Point Road, and then you follow Schrader Lane back to the subject property. This is just a zoomed in version of that same area plan that shows the existing drive here. This is the approximate location of where that gate was. So then you traverse back to get to the property. This is an overhead view of the existing single-family home that shows, outlines the loading and unloading areas and handicap access, existing parking lot, overflow parking, and then an existing barn that's on the site. And then there is a set of stone retaining walls with plantings, which I'll show here in a few minutes. The property is owned and operated by the Young Family Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization that was established to oversee the home and land after the owner learned of her terminal illness shortly after the design and beginning of construction of the oversized log home that's located on the property. Ms. Young's vision was to use the property as a nature sanctuary where groups and individuals could use the building and grounds for meditation, or meditation, sorry, not mediation. Could do mediation there, I guess, and personal reflection. The foundation was unaware of the approval needed to operate this foundation from the property for weddings, receptions, seminars, and other group events, and now are coming forward with this request for the conditional use permit. So this is the east view looking at the existing single-family home that is used as a retreat center. This is the southwest view. This is the northwest view. This is another view, excuse me, the northwest, I'm sorry, the north view. This is the lower level of the home. And then the retaining walls that I showed on the previous one, this is part of those that all have wildflowers planted along them. And then this is looking northwest from the center. So this is the view from the back of the property, or back of the home. This just kind of gives you an overview of the topo of the land, how it lays. The applicant is also requesting a parking surface waiver from section 26340, number 2, that says that roads and parking area shall be of non-dusting all-weather type. According to the applicant's justification statement, by requiring the road, which is approximately 1,500 feet, and parking area of 8,500 square feet to be paved, it would create an exceptional financial hardship to the foundation in the current driving services, keeping with the spirit and purpose of the center as well as the rural nature of the property. So in summary, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for a private event venue on 110 acres. And they're also asking for a parking surface waiver of section 260 that requires the roads and parking area to be non-dusting, all-weather type. And that is all that I have.
And any motions you'd want us to do in that order?
Yes, please. 1, then 2.
Okay, questions for Amy?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Amy, was the structure originally built as a single-family dwelling, or was it always built from day one to be a retreat center?
You may ask that from the applicant. It was permitted as a single-family structure, but I'm not sure how far in the construction it was at the time they learned of the illness.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Amy. Okay, if we can have the applicant come forward,
Do you want to swear? I've got a couple of witnesses. Do you want to swear everybody at the same time?
we can.
If I could.
Sure.
Mr. Harrison, you're going to testify. Ma'am, I think you're going to speak in favor, are you not? That way we can.
Good morning, everybody. If you can raise your right hand. Okay,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barry Baxter. I'm an attorney here in LaGrange, 117 West Main Street. I represent the applicant along with Mr. Harrison, who is present to testify about, he can testify about probably more about this than I can, but essentially, we will answer your question, Mr. Funk. I'll get a lady up here who can answer exactly the timing of that. This is a 5,500 square foot home, single-family residence that was constructed. Obviously, from these pictures, I mean, this is a beautiful structure, and it does provide for a great location to have these types of events. By way of history, and I believe it was in the application, there was a meeting held early on. So how this kind of transpired is the applicant saw some of those nice signs around the county that indicate how you get to good places in the county, those brown signs that are there for the tourists. And they thought, hey, this would be great. Why don't we get us one of those? And so they went to the Chamber of Commerce in an effort to try to get one of those, and the Chamber said, well, you know, you probably need to go and talk to the folks over at Planning and Zoning and make sure you're in good shape about what you're doing. And they come to find out that they have a problem. So that's what prompted this. That's how they'd already been operating to some extent, and without any complaint. I mean, Planning and Zoning, I don't think would tell you that there was complaints filed against them. I know that's how this happens sometimes, is they get a complaint in and they call somebody up and say, hey, listen, you're doing something that's in violation of the ordinance. You need to stop, and you need to come in here and straighten this out if you want to try to continue that. This is not a complaint situation. This is just something that they kind of fell backwards into finding out they had a problem. But then when they first started operating, they actually notified the neighbors up and down Schrader and had an open house and had those folks come down and talk to them about what they were doing. There wasn't any opposition at that point from any of the neighbors. They do have a couple of letters. Did these get filed? You got the support letters? There's a couple of letters. This is from an adjoining property owner. There we go. From an adjoining property owner who couldn't be here today, who has no issue with what they're doing. And this is from a gentleman who lives on, and his wife who live on Schrader, who likewise, they don't have any problem with anything that's going on. Neither of these individuals could be here today. They would have come in support, but I would ask to file these in the record, Mr. Chairman, just in support of our application. This is not a high traffic use that we're talking about. There are not events going on there every day. There's not a ton of people coming in and out on a real regular basis. They've had some events that have had up to 40, 50 people that come in and out. I mean, they're going to travel in. They're going to stay on the location during whatever the event is. They're going to travel back out. They have a wedding that was supposed to be, there was 80 people invited. I think they're down to 40 now. It's gotten substantially smaller, but that's coming up here in the very near future. The idea here is just to have a place where people can go in Oldham County, where they can have a meeting, where they can have some type of retreat. and be able to enjoy this piece of property. I mean, this is a beautiful piece of property, and obviously this is a beautiful residence that was constructed on the site. So in order to do that, they need the conditional use permit to be able to have this private event. And further, in looking at this, I'm not sure, and Albert, you can probably speak to this. How did the parking waiver come about? Come up here, and is that something that Amy called to your attention, or did you call that to Amy's attention? So we get the application filed, and Amy, doing her due diligence as normal, says, oh, by the way, you've got this other issue that needs to be addressed. There is an existing gravel parking lot. You saw that there is a long driveway. There's a pretty good sized parking lot to go and to try to pave that and get all of that so that you don't have just this gravel would be extremely expensive. It's not something that they have the money to do. And that's the reason that they're asking for that. That would pose a real hardship on them if they had to try to come up with the money to get that done. Come on up, Helen, and explain, if you would, just a little bit about what Valerie's vision was and what it is that you guys are trying to continue on her behalf, okay?
Yeah, okay.
And if you could start by just stating your name and address, please.
Helen Heddens, 7229 Old Clore Lane, Prospect, Kentucky. So Valaterra, you might be curious about the name, is Valerie, Terra, land, Valerie's land. So that's how the name came out. But Valerie had lived on the land for 20 years and absolutely loved it, and had lived in a little, very rundown hut of a house, and finally decided she wanted to live there and not move into the city, and started the process of creating her dream house. She started that in 2011. Valerie was very precise, and I think she had 2 architects, went through several iterations of how it was going to go. But anyway, so she finally decided on working with Bill Pace, and it's a beautiful structure. You can tell it a little bit from the outside, but it's has 2 barns that were brought from Ohio. And so this was going to be her dream house. And about 2012, 2013, she got diagnosed, she fell sick and got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Valerie was a healer, was her profession herself, and she went about trying to heal herself from this. And it took about a year into the process of the building, to your question. It was about 2013 or there's about that she realized that she was not going to be able to beat the cancer. And so Valerie was divorced and she had no children. And she saw that this land and this house could be her legacy. So she asked 4 of her friends to join with her in to start a foundation to give this land and this house forward as a legacy for her that could continue to provide a space for healing workshops and meetings and organizations and for retreats for people to come out and use the land for healing in the way in which she loved, and also use the land in which she also believed.
And Helen, some of the things that have taken place on the property, I mean, obviously you all didn't know you were in violation.
We had no idea.
So the property has been used for some events, correct?
Yes.
And just tell them about the types of events that have taken place at the property already.
Right. So we've had a variety of workshops. We've had the natural, I'm blanking on the name, Natural Lands Commission has had board meetings at our place. They have land out in eastern Kentucky. We've had various empowerment workshops. We've had meditation workshops. We've had yoga workshops. We've had church groups out. That's.
Had a wedding, you've already
Well,
had?
we've had a couple of weddings, and the weddings mostly, if they're going to be inside, they can't be larger than 60 because the space really doesn't allow that. Do you want me to talk about the application process? That just popped in my head. So it's not like the property isn't like the public can just show up, or you can just say, hey, I want to come out there and do something. So part of the vision is that if someone applies, they have to meet the mission of the foundation. So it has to meet some sort of healing requirement. So most people who apply submit an inquiry. Angie, our Director of Operations, will ask them out to meet with them. Basically, everyone is met by Angie before they come out. And then they are invited to fill out an application. And then the application, if it fits the mission, and also after Angie explains how the place works and the limitations, then the board votes on applications. So it's not like anyone can just come out. It needs to meet what the actual mission of the foundation is.
And there is an amount, I mean, you charge, obviously, for
Oh.
this. So explain how that works. What is there a set price? Do you say, okay, if you're gonna use 4 hours, you pay X dollars, or?
Yes, it is quite involved. I don't know that you want that detail, but it is very involved about if you're doing a half day, a full day, if it involves overnight. There's lots of different requirements. If it's going to be a whole weekend, yes. Do you want to hear that? Okay.
Fine.
I'd be happy. Okay. All right. I'm just aware of the
Are
time.
you guys a for-profit entity?
We are a nonprofit entity.
Okay.
And we are a nonprofit operating foundation, which means we don't give out grants. We run this center. So it's its own little unique thing.
Okay, and the Young Family Foundation owns the property,
Owns the property.
and Valerie transferred the property to the foundation?
That's right. So while Valerie, towards the end of her life, I was one of the people, 4 of her friends created the foundation, and then the assets did not transfer nothing went into effect until after she passed away. Her assets transferred into the foundation.
And was I accurate when I advised them that, at least to our knowledge, none of the neighbors have voiced any kind of concern or problem with anything that you all are doing on the property?
No one has voiced any concerns, and actually, we had an open house and invited all the neighbors by to just be aware, because we wanted them to be aware. So, yes.
Nobody said to you, hey, if you're gonna do this, we need to turn Schrader Lane into a big wide open roadway or anything like that? Have they indicated to you that you're gonna have to do any kind of improvements like that?
No one has said that to
Okay.
us, no. Yes.
Actually, they kinda like that it's this little country lane, don't they, to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, yes, yes.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Harris?
Excuse me. Do I need to wait? Question forward. Do I need to?
All organizations, if it's not an individual applying to use the space, if it's an organization applying, has to be nonprofit.
Mr. Harrison would like to make a couple comments if he could.
Thank you.
Albert, state your name and address, please.
Albert Harrison, 114 McMakin Manor here in LaGrange. Here is the surveyor and a consultant. The roadway is always a concern of the agencies here in Oldham County. Schrader Lane does not meet the standards for a full-blown county road. It's not what would be approved for a subdivision, but the neighbors all understand the road situation. Most of the driveways are on the south side, and they provide opportunities for oncoming traffic to pull into the driveway, come back out onto the road. And I got to thinking last night about other roadways that are similar to it, and just for you who are familiar with Oldham County, we've got several roads that are through roads, not dead end like this, but they provide traffic from point A to point B, and that would include Ballard School Road, 18 Mile Creek Road, Rebel Ridge Road, Bohannon Lane, and Old Westport Road, just out in this area, and they're all this very similar condition to what we have there on Schrader Lane, with much, much more traffic. And then we've got dead-end roads like Schrader Lane that would include Greenhaven Lane off 42, Axton Lane on 42, and then Buckeye Lane south and north. So this is not an unusual situation that we have with these old roads that at one time were probably just a one-lane driveway to a home or to a farm. And gradually been improved. It's a hard surface asphalt roadway, but the delivery trucks don't seem to have a problem with it, and local people don't have a problem with it. So I think it's in keeping with what's out there. It's perfectly straight. If somebody were to require that be widened and improved, we now have straighter lane dragway, which is not what anybody wants. So I'm here for any questions you might have.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, I mean, again, that, obviously we've got two components to this. We've got our conditional use permit and the waiver. Working in reverse order, obviously, we think it would be a big hardship, and honestly, it would be kind of inconsistent with the natural state of this property to require us to have a paved parking lot out there. And the conditional use, this obviously is a conditional use in these zones. You can impose certain conditions if you think they're necessary. From our perspective, we are not causing any problems for any of the neighbors. There's no hardship being imposed on anybody, and this is a perfect use for this property, so we would ask you all to approve the use that we are asking for. And that concludes our presentation.
Very good, thank you. Questions?
Yes, I have a question. We're talking about the gravel parkway. Will that be handicap accessible? It's like someone in a
I'll let Albert
wheelchair.
speak to that.
Put someone in a wheelchair on a gravel road. It's not.
Well, so, and I'll let Albert speak to that. That is going to be addressed, but I'll let Albert.
I was wondering, it's-
The roadway will not, but Amy, how do we get back to the one that showed the, that one probably work. At the left of the photograph is the garage for this facility. You've got the oversized one for, I guess, a camper and a regular size. That is where loading and unloading would occur for handicap, and in order to be ADA compliant, which the building department is going to require us to do, that parking area there would have a hard surface on it, possibly, but we anticipate being able to use the garage because it's large enough, there's nothing else in there to pull into the garage and unload there and go directly into the house without even having to touch the gravel.
And so if you remember from the aerial, there's a separate parking area that's about, available for about 20 cars. And that's going to remain, that would be our request, that it remain gravel. Okay.
basically have a drop-off service, just drop off in the drive and then go park, and it's
Yes.
a lot easier.
Right.
I was just curious about, gravel with a wheelchair
Yeah.
or a walker.
But there are some handicapped people who drive their own vehicles, and they could park in the garage and not have
Oh,
an issue with it.
okay, that's even
Yeah.
better, okay. I was just curious, thank you.
Good question.
Two-part question for me. It has to do with what you mentioned about mission and how it happens, and then that leads to what kind of events are going on. So I'm trying to understand, first part of the question is, you mentioned mission defines whether or not someone can come. And second, then what kind of events are you planning? And then I guess the third part of that question that I'm going to go to is how big of size, is there a size limitation? Is there, because that has to go with, if you did something with 80 people is one thing versus 800 people, obviously. So I need those three elements is my question.
Okay.
Mission first, mission first.
Okay, good. So the mission it's, so we interpret it somewhat loosely. But the main thing is that if someone wants to come out and just have some big fraternity party, it does not meet the mission, is basically, so it has.
I'm going to ask you to state the mission in the positive, not what it's not, but what it is.
Okay. The mission is, so I don't have it off the top of my head. It is written down.
Close.
Something close. So it is to provide a space for alternative, complementary healing practices, to provide a space for that type of work. And we do not provide workshops. So what the Young Family Foundation does is we oversee the facility, and then people apply to bring in what it is they want to offer. But we don't put on workshops there.
Okay, so your comment was we interpret it loosely because then a wedding or other things. So help me understand what kind of events will be coming what kind of things will you be doing at this? What kind of things would be approved?
Right. Small weddings, we would never approve an 800-person wedding. It would have to be all outside. We don't have the facilities for that.
Right.
And we know that, and we proactively limit that. As well as, workshops, workshops, retreats, trainings, are definitely the things that are within our wheelhouse. And the average size of those is like between 12 and 15 people are usually the size that are coming out there.
Okay, so then a typical condition of approval of this kind of thing is that there is a limit on the number of guests.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
So if we look back at history, which doesn't always apply to every case,
Right.
it can be completely different. But with these we usually put a limit as a condition on the conditional use permit, is that there's a limit of X number of people could be on site for any one event.
Right.
So I'm going to be asking at some point, whether it's now, this second, or whether it's sometime before we end our testimony section, I would like to know what you guys would recommend for a limit, an upper limit on the number of people that would be on the property using it.
Right, so during the day.
And that's the other part that
Right.
I was trying to segment it, because
right.
how many people,
That's
how
right.
late, would there be projected music outside or things like that? So I'm
Right.
trying to walk you through.
Right. So, first of all, I have to say, we're a new organization. We're still sort of working our way through this. If it is something that's over 70, it has to involve outside. Now, so we haven't necessarily set a limit around that. We would never do 800, I can tell you that. So,
Well, so let's get
okay,
to it.
let's do that.
You're not gonna do 800. You gonna
We
do
are.
400?
No.
Have you had anybody contact you and say, we wanna have a 400
Oh, for
person wedding?
God's sakes, no.
200?
No.
We're getting there.
I know.
We're narrowing
I'm
it
doing my
down.
best
We're
cross-examining
narrowing
work
it
on
down,
it.
thank
Yeah.
you.
How
So-
about 100?
So this is really, so what you're seeing here is this is really something we have not.
So you have had a request for an 80-person wedding,
We have.
and you felt like the property would accommodate that outside?
So, and what part of the qualification that we did in approving that is that they had to provide porta potties. So, yes.
Okay, so obviously, the internal structure would not have the
Would not.
capability of supporting that?
Would not.
Right? So your range is about 100 people is what I think we've talked about.
I think yes.
Max.
I mean, maybe 150 if they brought all those porta potties, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if Mr. Houchin says, well, I appreciate that, but I'm going to give you 100, are you going to be yelling at me in the hallway?
I hope not.
Okay. All right. But 200, we agree, is probably too many.
200 is probably too many, yeah.
Okay. Does that help?
So what I would suggest is that sometime between now and when we get to the end, if this was to be approved, you guys need to maybe huddle for a 5-minute break and decide what you would like to ask that number to be.
Okay,
I'm not trying to put you on the spot to do it, but I am trying to put you on the spot to do it today.
okay, all right.
And Mr. Houchin, just for your information, and I can read it, they've got a website. Look at that. They've got a website, and the website has a specific tab about use eligibility, and it goes through certain criteria that are listed on there. And she has testified that they loosely apply this, right? So I assume one of the potential things, for example, is other nonprofits can use it. Well, I assume that when my daughter gets married, she would be considered a nonprofit in order for them to fit their criteria. And they want it to be consistent with the mission of the Young Family Foundation. And the types of things, including but not limited to, that they talk about are body and spirit workshops, meditation, yoga, myth, ritual, shamanism, contemplative and spiritual studies, health and healing, including massage, tai chi, I can't pronounce this other thing they've got, Reiki, naturopathy, mind and psychology, including shadow work, transpersonal psychology, psychotherapy, counseling, and eye movement desensitization, creative expression, visual arts, music, drumming, dance, writing, theater, personal relationships, self and family, leadership skills, nature and sustainable living. So a lot of good work type stuff, I suppose, is what it is. I mean, they're not talking about having a kegger out there, so. You had 3 parts of your question, and I think we've only gotten to 2, if I remember, but I don't remember the third
I
part.
don't either.
Holy cow. I'm trying to remember the third part now.
Well, you're going down the path of,
Yes, the third part then is, when we look at other kind of usage on this, to not impede on the neighbors, we would ask about limitations about projected sound. Is that how amplified? So we're looking at something, if someone had speakers and music and it was a party after the wedding or whatever. So we would look for limitations of what time would that be over with, during the week and during the weekend. Also about lighting, if you had additional lighting, would it be downward facing, and how far? And so I'm looking for then those kind of limitations, and specifically then testimony about how close a neighbor is to you.
You do that?
I'm gonna let Albert speak a little bit about some of that, and you may have to add some other stuff.
I think it's important to recognize or understand just how remote this location is. The closest house to it is the one that's owned by Mrs. Dunbar, and that's over here on the other side of a very deep ravine and in the woods, and that's about 900 feet away from the retreat center itself. The next closest house doesn't even show on the photograph. It's down at the lower left-hand corner, and that's where Miss Brown lives, and it's probably closer to a half a mile from where we are. When you come back out on Schrader Lane, and I don't think you get to the first driveway past Miss Dunbar for maybe half a mile. So really, we don't have any neighbors. Going in the other direction over here is the old Boone Gardner nursery property. That's well over half a mile from where we are. So it's not like you're having an entertainment derby day event in the backyard in a subdivision.
That's the testimony I was looking for to understand.
well,
Thank you.
but to further that, Albert, I don't know if this is directed to you or Barry. As you are probably aware, when we'll set conditions, many conditions on this type of, if this is something that we approve. Some of those conditions are things that Rob was going down as far as hours of operation, sound, lighting, signage, number of people. I understand that some of this may not have already been defined yet, but those would be conditions that would be set here. So do we have that, or do we want to take a break and get some of that?
Mr. Chairman, from signage, there's not going to be any additional signage, so that's easy. You said that one, and I know, they're not asking to put a big sign out, and, that's going to cause any kind of issue. They've got actually signage in one of the pictures that Amy showed at the front of the property that's already existing, just announcing that this is the name of the farm, and that's not going to change. Hours of operation, in speaking with them, they'd like 11. They could live with 10 p.m. at night. So that is another condition that can be addressed. And then the number of people, again, Helen said, well, 150, but I think that based upon my discussions with them, that they could live with 100 if they had to. And most of these events are 15, 20 people. I mean, it's the occasional wedding that you might get into something a little more than that. But, and if you wanted to indicate, they wouldn't have an event more than once a month that has more than 50 people, and with a maximum of 100, that would be something that they could live with as well.
Schrader Lane, does it terminate, this property, Schrader Lane dead ends where this property starts?
Yes, sir. And one of the pictures that Amy showed, actually, Valerie had put some gravel, I guess, because it terminates at her driveway, and she put a gate up. People get down to the end of it, they can't turn around, so there's a little gravel pad in one of those pictures. There's not, there's no bulb, there's no nothing back there. So if if you get back there, you're either backing out or you're till the next driveway. So she put something down there to just let people turn around.
How far off, the retreat center, is that where everything will be happening?
Yes.
The weddings and everything will be at the retreat center, and
or
how
further.
far off of Schrader Lane is the retreat center? Approximately.
1/8 mile plus.
Dunbar is 900 feet, is the closest neighbor.
Yes.
Anything beyond that, you're looking at half a mile, I think is what you said, as
Yes.
far as, okay. All right. 11 o'clock at night, 150 visitors max. No additional lighting on the sign, no additional signage, no lighting on the signage. Lighting, downward lighting.
There's no
security
existing.
lighting at the center, but there's no outdoor lighting.
Okay.
So in terms of setting standards for projected music, we would say nothing after like 10 o'clock. Would that be acceptable? Gotta say it.
Yes.
Come
Some-
on up there.
Get on the record.
This is new to me. Yes.
Okay. And in terms of additional lighting, if you had it go into the evenings, could we, a stipulation that would be downward facing, so it wouldn't go towards?
Absolutely, and it's in keeping with the whole mission around valuing the natural environment.
Based on the testimony then, what I want, part of the surface waiver has to do with dust. And so, based on the testimony, I'm going to make a positive statement and want you to confirm if I'm right. Any dust coming from that additional parking lot would not be going in the air onto a neighbor near any home, correct?
There's gonna be particles, but I think it's gonna filter out in the air. You're not gonna have a cloud of dust completely blanketing Miss Dunbar's home. It's too
Thank
far
you.
away and too many things in between.
I have a question for Albert. Pertaining to, and when I look at something like this, and from the security background, I think about security vehicles, ambulance, fire trucks, things of that type, trying to get on the property when we have possibly 100 cars, if you had the maximum, trying to exit the property. And what is your thought about if that building caught on fire at the end of an event, and those 100 individuals were trying to get out while emergency vehicles were trying to get on? Is there pull-offs? Are there along that 1/8 mile route? Is the ground substantial enough for cars to move out of the way so emergency vehicles can get in? And I'm kind of asking an open question because I want that testimony, stated today that is possible.
There is ample opportunity from the retreat center down to about here to get off the road. From there out to the entrance, no. You're pretty much trapped because you got a steep bank on the left-hand side going in, and it drops off to a creek on the other side. So it could be a problem, but, oh my gosh, I don't know how you protect it.
I think you can understand my concern if something did happen in emergency vehicles. With that many people, heart attacks, possibly sickness, possibly a fire, something like that may require emergency vehicles to try to enter into that property, and those are my concerns, something physically causing them not being able to get on the property.
I don't know what would prevent them from getting on the property. We just have to contain the people from leaving the property.
Well,
There's plenty of room out here in the field for people to go and get away from the retreat center.
Okay, I just want that part of the testimony
Right.
and questioning.
well,
In your opinion, there's no issue with the surface? I mean, it's, this driveway would support a fire truck or an ambulance if it had to come down the driveway, right?
Well, yes, the fire department's already been out there and approved the facility.
Okay.
Access and the facility itself.
Okay.
questions?
Can I just say something about the fire department?
Sure.
So the fire chief has been out and brought the truck out, turned it around, made sure everything was compliant from their end, and they've seen the facility, just FYI.
Okay.
Thank you for providing that.
All right, anything else?
Yeah, so in terms of the property itself, one of the uses that we're talking about is renting it for the weekend and people spending the night overnight. So that would be a single-use user. So if I came in and rented the property for the weekend and had my family in or something, we would be able to spend the night there, correct? Or no?
If,
Okay?
you
All right.
come up here when you're
Okay.
answering.
Yeah.
If it met the mission.
Okay, so if I met the mission and you approved it, then we'd be spending overnight. Now, my question is if overnights are allowed, what point, I'm trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between a single user doing it and then whether there should be some limitation so we don't turn it into a bed and breakfast, so that there's 5 couples spending the night and it turned into a B&B, which is a whole different application than what's being applied for here. So I'm just trying to understand what would be allowed or not be allowed in terms of overnights.
You mean as far as size or
Well,
why they're staying?
could
or-
each of us come and spend the night on the same
Are
night?
you looking,
or
are you
we
asking
just-
for maximum number of overnight guests?
I'm not sure how to navigate this. This is a little different than we've done before, because this has
I
overnight
think what he's
facilities.
asking, can it be rented to multiple people at multiple times? So can Rob rent the facility out for 2 bedrooms and you rent it out for 2 bedrooms and you don't know each other? So, of that nature.
No.
Okay, so what?
So in other words, all of you all could come and spend the night if you're gonna have a Board of Adjustments retreat, and it meets the mission statement, okay? So, and I suppose you could say you're bringing your spouses, so yes, but you couldn't call and say, I'd like 2 rooms in the facility, and then the chairman calls and you just happen to know each other, but you're not going together, and he says, I'd like 3 rooms. It has to be one cohesive group.
So in terms of a condition of use, I'm trying to figure out how to do something that allows you to do what you want to do, yet doesn't allow it to turn into something else. So would it be that the facility would only be rented by one entity at a time?
I think that's fair.
Is this gonna be a B&B at all?
Well,
No.
that's where I'm going. They're
That's
not
what you got-
asking
that's
for a
what-
bed and
that's what
breakfast.
you're gonna have to answer,
They're
because
they're
otherwise
not
you got other
they're not gonna
conditions to meet.
they can confirm that they're not providing food preparation and things of that nature. So they have a list of preferred caterers on their website. So they are not, they're not applying for a bed and breakfast because they're not providing food to the people that are coming.
Because then it gets into building code.
Well, that's right,
questions.
that's right.
And this is not, they don't have a kitchen that they would be able to prepare food there. They can heat it, but they can't prepare it there, so that's why there's a caterer involved, so it wouldn't be a bed and breakfast.
We can put a casserole in the oven that's pre-made, but we can't slice an apple on the site, is what we've been told. Because the second we slice that apple, that's food preparation.
Seriously.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, but is my condition, I'm not sure who ought to ask this. I'm trying to figure out how to, if there should we put some a condition, or because they're not approved,
They are asking
That-
for a private event venue.
Right.
but yet they're doing overnight, and so this is a mixed use kind of
But
thing.
you always have one condition that's consistent. It is only relates to the application today. If they change it for any reason, then it's covered, they would have to come back. That one kind of catch-all, it only applies to the application today, if you choose to approve it. So I think it's covered by that.
Okay, so, but let me ask this question again, I'm not sure, anybody can answer that want to. Is putting a condition on there that the property would only be rented by one entity at a time is there any reason that that would not be a reasonable?
Well, I think it's hard to enforce it. And I don't get the impression that they would want to do that necessarily anyway. And there aren't that many bedrooms to be able to rent it out like for a lodge so
It's my opinion, they're asking for the private event venue. I don't think there should be any conditions trying to limit the use of it. That could be covered on complaint and code enforcement.
However, in the past ones, we've said everyone who's a guest on the property has to leave the property by no later than midnight. And in this case, that's not what we're saying at all. It's completely different in that.
Well, but we can put hours of operation of the, well, you're right. I mean, hours of operation of the venue, what's the venue?
Yeah, what's
Is
the
11
venue?
o'clock. Well, the venue is overnight guest.
And then you can't, they're not leaving at
Well, that would
11
be-
o'clock. Exactly. That's where I was headed, Larry. That's where I'm
I
I'm
think
trying
one
to.
thing is the hours of operation, I would ask that it apply to exterior use. And the overnight is single, group, or entity.
And is there, could we put a limit on the number of the people spending overnight?
Sure.
Would that be a way to do that? I'm trying to figure out how to
We'll
limit
try to
this.
help with this. One of the steps of the process we've gone through is to meet with Mark Tice, the chief building inspector, about this. He's been to the site, he was involved in it when it was under construction. And there's a limit from a public safety standpoint of how many people can spend their night. And we're willing to submit that we will go with what his recommendation is. Because it's very, I think it's gonna be pretty small. I think, what were we down to?
It was
12, I think, maximum. And that's because of the safety within the building and being able to get out in the event there is an emergency. He's also requiring some additional exit lighting and some hallway lighting in case the power goes out.
Based on the number of bedrooms as well, probably.
But again, Rob, I don't think we need to worry about a condition here on that. Let the other agencies deal with that. But what Barry had suggested was any outside venue or outside event ends at, we can terminate a time for an outside event, outside use.
That addresses it.
The event is
So if we had
a
150
wedding.
people, they could have whatever people in the house after that time. You see what I'm saying? We
Yes,
just
yeah,
gotta
that's-
word it
that's right,
right.
that's
so
right.
that I'm not trying to say they can't have overnights. I'm just trying to figure out how to put the conditions correctly. Because I don't want to say
I
it got to be
actually
over at
just-
11.
And I'm saying,
Just talking through this,
Yep.
I mean, I would think that you limit the number of people until 11 o'clock, and then you say thereafter, there can't be any more than 12 people on site. I mean, if that addresses your concern, I think.
well, I mean, that's fine. But again, I don't think we need to set that type of condition.
I like your thinking, but I'm trying to be helpful.
To me, that's if we say there's an hour of operations that it's over, then that implies
That the event is over, that any
Understand.
outside event is over.
I understand. And then, it goes to the fact of some of these things that we've done in the past that we don't want it to go through the night. And so then to limit the number, like he's suggesting, seems like a reasonable. That seems, I'm great with what was just suggested.
What if UK is playing in a regional tournament on the West Coast that night? If people want to stay after the event on the large screen TV, which is
30
there.
people in the house till midnight watching the game, 12,
I'm okay with in the house a higher number than 12. That was just what was suggested, because I understand what you're saying.
Right.
I just think we have to put some reasonable limitation on it, reasonable subjective.
Can I suggest, we have actually a neighbor who would like to speak in favor, and I'd like to get her on the record if we could. And in the meantime, let me take a stab at trying to write out some conditions to see if we can agree on some conditions.
that's fine. That's
That'd
fine.
be great.
Before we get,
Well, before we get there, though, you've heard that 12 may be less than actually what the board thinks there, that maybe it would be a higher number, so.
all right, before I call those in favor and opposed, any other questions? I think that's where we were. Okay. is there anybody wishing to speak in favor, ma'am? You could state your name and address.
My name's Laurie Rush. I'm at 6304 Schrader Lane.
And if you could raise your right hand, be sworn in. Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
To this point, it's been a very well-kept secret. And the neighbors have been back, and we didn't even know it was there. It was lovely. It's very tranquil and stuff. They are very hidden, so unless you see a lot of traffic going up and down Schrader Lane, you don't even know what's going on back there. So at this point, I'm all for, what they do. I'll be honest, though, didn't know weddings were occurring, and that concerns me if that gets out, that they'll be having a lot of them. And as long as we can stipulate how many, every weekend, I don't want a wedding back there. Schrader Lane is not big enough for that. So yes, I'm in favor for them, but not to the point that there's big weddings all the time.
Okay.
Sorry, I've never heard about the weddings before.
Well, let me ask a question, because one of the things I had suggested was not to exceed once a month.
Oh, that's good.
So
Yeah,
and
that would be
you all
fine.
were okay, so that's okay.
Yeah, my concern is that
we
it's
fully
such a
understand.
well-kept secret. If word gets out, it is a venue you can rent for weddings. I can see it booked all the time, because it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous back there. And the pictures don't do it justice.
So let me ask, if we don't put once a month, or we don't limit the number, do you still have the same concerns if we, other conditions that you've heard us discuss, such as the number of people and the traffic, signage, lighting, limit, no additional signs, no additional lighting?
They're so hidden, no one's
So
being
those
affected.
types of conditions that we've talked about, does that satisfy any concerns that you would have?
Yeah, I'm fine with all of that.
Okay.
It's only the traffic for large numbers of weddings and stuff.
Okay, so then the question is, when you talk about large number, that's a nebulous kind of comment. So is that 12 a year? Is that one a weekend? Is that, tell me your opinion. This is an opinion. You're just stating your opinion.
One weekend, I think, would be fine.
Okay, great.
But I know weddings, they can get booked. You let it out, it's available, they're gonna be there every weekend. And it's gonna become a wedding venue.
Okay,
That's
Thank
what
you.
I don't want to happen.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Hang on, Albert, I'll get to you in a minute. Were there any other questions for Lori? All right, anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the applicant? Okay, anybody wishing to oppose? Okay, any rebuttals from the applicant, Albert?
Yes, this facility was never designed for nor intended to be a wedding venue. If you go to their website, you'll find that, and I'm reading this, the foundation has determined that some weddings, because of their spiritual and sacred nature, can help the foundation fulfill its mission and therefore are permitted uses of the sanctuary, which is what they call the facility. So it's not going to be advertised as a wedding venue. It has to fit in with what the intent of the retreat center is. So some people wanting to have a wedding there some people wanting to have a wedding there are going to be turned down because they don't fit into that mission.
Thank you for that, because I meant to ask how a wedding fits into the mission, and you just did it.
That's what
Thank
it
you.
is. And this is a little bit off the subject, but to me, it's so relevant to the spirit behind this. Valerie was a harpist, and for over 20 years, she would play at centers where people were dying, because she learned early on that the last of your senses, touch, sound, vision, the last one is hearing, to go. And she wanted people in that situation to hear music as the last thing, the last sound that they heard. And I think that fits in perfectly with what she was trying to do with this facility. It is different. It's not intended to be a commercial moneymaker or anything like that. I wish I had met the woman when she was still alive. Because I've heard one of her good friends play down at the VA on Zorn Avenue. And they took turns playing, sometimes they played together. But it was the same reason behind it, and it's a beautiful concept. So,
Okay.
not relevant to your consideration, but I think it's worth noting.
Thank you. Barry, do you need a few minutes? No, sir. Okay, so we've had, those in favor, we've had opposed, we're at a time of rebuttal. Any other statements for rebuttal?
No, sir, I just will give you the list of what we would propose as conditions.
Okay, all right, hang on one second on that then. Rebuttal, ma'am, do you have anything else that you've like to say that you've heard in response to Albert? Okay. All right, final statements. Let's go ahead and.
Mr. Chairman, I took a moment to just see if we could clarify this issue about these conditions. I'm glad my handwriting's not great, but I'm glad to file this in the record if that would help. The proposed conditions would indicate the maximum number of guests at any single event not to exceed 150 people. Any amplified sound or music to cease at 10 p.m. No more than one wedding per month to occur on site. Hours of operation for any event, excluding overnight stays, to cease at 11 p.m. Not more than 12 overnight guests after 11 p.m. No signage other than the farm name at the property. And then the standard condition that the conditional use permit for the private event venue shall only apply to the application that you all heard at today's meeting. So with those conditions, we would ask you to approve the conditional use.
There you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
And also to approve the parking waiver. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Questions for board members? To anybody in the audience?
How long has the organization been a C3 organization or been certified as a nonprofit?
Right. We filed the bylaws in 2014.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll close the floor and open it up for general discussion among board members. Any discussion on the conditions that Barry laid out?
I think conditions in this situation are necessary. What I don't think anyone wants, including the neighbors and people involved, is for this location to turn into a concert venue, a multi-use type venue, the next Woodstock location.
Doesn't fall within the mission.
Yeah, and so, but that mission can be,
Right. Over time.
over time, that mission can change.
That's right, that's right.
And turn into something else. People that went to Woodstock might tell you that it meant
It
that condition.
changed.
I do have to scratch my head a little bit when it comes to very well-informed individuals starting a nonprofit agency like this and not taking on the responsibility of finding out what they needed from a business standpoint, because this is a business, even though it is a nonprofit. And so I have somewhat concern because the stringent requirements to accept and use this property is very well thought out, I think, from what I'm looking at and hearing. But yet, on the other side, they didn't do the due diligence to finding out what do we need to do to start a business of this type. And I think that's a concern that I have, is that it seems to be about what they wanted. And I understand where they're coming from. It's a very positive cause, I think. But it doesn't seem like they took into consideration what their business requirement was going to be. And that's a concern. Based on the testimony and with the requirements that Barry has laid out, I think it is something that I could approve. But somewhere we have to educate people what they need or what their requirements are gonna be when they come before this court.
Okay. Any other comments? Rob, are you?
Well, I do have a couple more comments, I guess. I guess when I hear about what the more the mission is and those kind of things, I start thinking of the one condition that I'm actually thinking of making a little more liberal is the more than one wedding per month. Because if they do have, like, let's say it's November, December time, and they want to have a couple small weddings of 20, 30 people that fit into their mission in the same month, because it's a popular time to get married around the end of the year or whatever, I don't have an issue with that. And so I don't want to create restrictions that are overly restrictive, and that I appreciate the fact that they're willing to restrict and help us with conditions, figure this out. But for me, that one's a little more restrictive than I think I'm requiring.
I would agree with you.
So I would suggest that we liberalize that a little bit and make it less restrictive. I'm open to ideas.
Based on some of what I heard them saying was the capacity on the interior of the home might be 40 people on any given event on the interior. They have the propensity to do an outdoor wedding that could potentially exceed 50, 60, 80 people. It seems reasonable that if you have the capacity on the interior of the home to have an event that could function with 40 people on the interior that's not a wedding, I'm somewhat inclined to agree with what you're saying as well as to restricting the number of weddings, because technically a wedding is a wedding. Whether 20 people show up or 200 people show up, it's still that particular event. So kind of riding on the pigtails of what you're suggesting would be is that perhaps the wedding issue be identified, and maybe the frequency can increase if it's an indoor wedding versus an outdoor wedding, potentially based on the number of people that may be able to participate.
So maybe something like no more than 2 outdoor weddings per month, something like that, and then not put a restriction on indoor because you put the word outdoor. I'm working through here. We're discussing.
I'm inclined to follow what you're saying as to the number of exterior wedding events, but maybe we're going down a rabbit trail we don't need to, and perhaps we are.
If I may, what's the difference between a wedding with 150 people or a conference with 150 people? My opinion, none. You're limiting the amplified sound, you're limiting the time. So I think struggling with how many weddings is somewhat irrelevant in my opinion. It really has to do with how many vehicles might be coming and going from the property, the impact of joining properties, and the time. And I think you've got that covered by your other conditions. So if you were going to think about it being a little more liberal, as you say, I would just remove that completely. And, again, 100, however many people they have, for whatever event, the event is irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree.
Perhaps.
We had mentioned a condition of potentially making it where no more than one entity may rent the facility at a time. That wasn't written on here, but that was to try to.
That's an oversight on my part. So I don't have any issue with that being added to that, and I apologize.
Well, but it's enforcement is a real
I understand.
issue. And I think they're hearing not to rent it to more than one at the same time, and,
Enforcement would be the issue.
yeah, we
Yeah, I mean,
Look, and I don't get caught up in the enforcement issue as much as some people do, because the way I look at it is, if there's a revocation hearing at some point of a CUP, you come in and you get testimony, and testimony then says, what did you do? And if it is a condition that was hard to enforce, but it could be part of future testimony, it could be part of a revocation if you ever got to that point. Not that I'm saying we would suggest that it would, but.
that is true, and I'm not opposed to that type of condition. I just don't think we need to put it.
The only reason that I was suggesting it initially was the thing of you renting 2 rooms and me renting 2 rooms was the scenario that we did before. but to avoid the whole B and B concept, because this does have overnight
So
accommodation.
again, they are here for a private event venue, and that's what we're making a motion on.
Private event venues typically don't have overnight accommodations. So what I'm trying to do is come up with some condition that makes it where they can have overnight accommodations. Because right now, that's my hang-up of putting a restriction so that I can vote in approval of this. So for me, putting some sort of condition that allows it to where that the overnight is restricted in some way so it doesn't turn into a B&B is what I'm trying to get, so that that's the only issue I have.
So we have just created a regulation regarding short-term rentals.
Okay?
What you're talking about falls into short-term rentals. That's not what they're applying for today. If they were going to rent to individuals from separately, they would have to get a short-term rental application in.
Okay, so what if it is one entity spending overnight as a short?
That's covered by this,
It's covered by this and
what
doesn't
you're
have to be
saying,
covered by
not
that.
not
The
12 people.
short-term rentals don't allow multiple rentals per day at all.
Right.
So they would not be allowed to rent rooms regardless under this application or a short-term rental application. You cannot rent under a short-term rental agreement to the adopted regulations that fiscal court just passed in March to multiple people for the same day. So we could not, if they had 6 bedrooms, they could not rent 3 to you and 3 to Tate.
And
They can have one contract per day.
And if they were going to do that, they would have to come under bed and breakfast, which they aren't serving breakfast.
Correct.
I know you're struggling with this.
Okay.
That
That helps me.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to work through.
That's-
That helps me, because that's what I was trying to get past. Thank you. So you're right, Larry.
In a roundabout way. Any other,
The only other restriction is obviously if we were inclined as a board to improve, then we would have to go through the CUP process, and then we would go through the part with the
parking?
parking. And so on the parking, just as the discussion for that, because of the distance between the parking and any neighbors, I'm not at all concerned and would be inclined to grant a waiver for the parking surface.
Okay. Further discussion? Is anybody ready to make a motion, or do we need time? I'm willing to take a motion, if anybody's ready.
Ready.
All right.
Move to approve OC-18-018 for conditional use permit for the location of 7101 Schrader Lane, LaGrange. Based on the testimony of the type of venue it would be doing, the type of events that would be putting it on, the restrictions that will come later in the motion, that it seems to be a proper integration into the community, and that a center of this type would be desirable to the community and not in conflict with the objectives and policies of the comprehensive plan. The conditions of approval would be that the maximum number of guests at any single event would not exceed 150 people. Any amplified sound or music would cease at 10 p.m. The hours of operation for any event, excluding overnight stays, would also cease by 11 p.m. There will not be more than 12 guests overnight after 11 p.m. There will be no additional signage other than the name of the property, which is an existing sign on the property. And the conditional use permit for the private event venue shall only be applied to the application considered at the May 17th, 2018 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the CUP has been approved. I'm willing to take a motion on the second part.
Move to approve OC-18-018 for a parking surface waiver based on the testimony of the distance from the parking area, which would not be paved or concrete. It would be a gravel lot. It would not create any kind of a dust or air pollution issue for any neighbors based on the distance stated in the testimony. The waiver for this shall only apply to the application considered at the May 17, 2018 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Application's been approved. Okay, meeting minutes.
Thank you.
We all received April's meeting minutes. Were there any edits or modifications to that? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve them?
A motion to approve minutes from the Thursday, April 19th meeting.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes have been approved. Other business?
You will have a meeting in June, as you can see from the agenda, the docket 18019. I did leave it on the agenda and just showed it as deferred because it was advertised. But that application most likely will come back in June. So, as always, the beginning of June, I'll send an email out to confirm our meeting with an updated agenda. That's it.
Okay. Anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thanks all.